Exposed, the sinister rules of our haunted Antarctic outpost for new recruits revealed at last. The freezing winds howled like restless spirits outside the base. Sarah shivered, clutching her parka tighter around her as the chilling mark of ice seeped into her bones. She was here now, at the edge of the world, far from the warmth of her Milwaukee home, a place filled with the muffled laughter of her children and the soft glow of television screens. A new job, a promise of stability to secure a future, wasn't that what she had wanted? But whispers hung in the air like fog, every grizzled veteran evoking a dark history that rattled the very foundation of the outpost. "We have rules here," a jaded supervisor warned during orientation, eyes darting, scanning the snow-covered horizon. "You memorize them and you keep your mouth shut. Trust me." The weight of his words echoed in her mind, pushing the warm memories of nights snuggled on the couch, sharing popcorn while cartoons played, further away from her grasp. Instead, dread began to color her surroundings. As the days passed and the flight of adventure ebbed, Sarah and her fellow recruits felt an unsettling shift beneath their glossy surface. The snow outside glittered, lovely yet deceptive, its blinding brightness hiding secrets buried deeper than the frost. Shadows moved in the corners of her vision, shadows that sent cold chills racing down her spine. Each night creaks and distant howls haunted the dim hallways, pulling Sarah into a loop of anxiety that tangled with her breathing. One night, drowning in chores to impress her superiors, she caught a flash out of the corner of her eye, a fleeting shadow darting across the blinding white. Fear gripped her heart. Panic spread like wildfire. Questions bubbled. What was it? Her nerves cracked. Then she awoke the next morning to find her children's handwritten note pinned to her bunk. It was raw yet sinister, words themselves alive, whispering secrets they had no right to know. "Mommy, can you see it too?" There it was. The trembling scrawl twisted her gut into knots of dread. What was going on? She wrote back, reassuring them she was fine, but soon those letters were replaced with chilling replies echoing her fears. "Don't trust them, Mom. The rules won't protect you." Were they messages from her children, or something more? Was it the words of children who longed for her, or the deep-set paranoia infecting her mind? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue, and as Sarah tried to hold on to sanity, the echo of her children's words driven deeper into her heart, she caught sight of the whispers curdling into a malicious undercurrent, interlacing her reality with that of her employers. Their camaraderie festered with secrets, an ever-tightening web around her. The pungently crisp air felt oppressive, as if the icy gusts were conspiring against her. Around her, shadows shifted and breathed. They murmured the twisted rules she thought might keep her life safe. The lights flickered, and her heart thudded in an unsteady rhythm. In that moment, a terrible realization flooded her senses. This base wasn't just a workplace, it was a predator, an insatiable beast with hungry eyes looking straight at her. And now, drawn into their nightmarish fold, she was faced with a question that clawed at her heart: who could she trust when sanctuary became a prison? With every letter that appeared, swapping her innocence for dread, Sarah knew one thing: escaping this frozen hell would demand more than just courage, it would take the unraveling of everything she believed in. Would she pay that unimaginable price? The howling winds threw icy slivers at the glass windows, each gust a taunt, whispering of chaos beyond the fragile walls of the base. Unease sat like a stone in Sarah's stomach. Every glance into the white abyss outside pricked her skin with goosebumps. Nightmares danced 2 steps ahead of her. The shadowy figure she glimpsed the previous night clawed its way into her thoughts, like a monster that could leap through the frost into her reality. With unease tightening her chest, Sarah unpinned the last letter from her bunk. Each word burned as she read it again. Don't trust them, the rules 1T protect you. Was the icy grip of despair snaking around her heart only a figment of her imagination? She felt the weight of it like heavy snow clinging and pressing. As her mind spiraled, she caught sight of her new colleagues huddled together in whispers, their faces pale, shadows dancing in the light of the fluorescent glow. Their eyes flickered nervously, darting toward her as though she were a predator waiting to pounce. The cozy camaraderie she'd envisioned had morphed into a tense alliance, fraught with unspoken fears. They seemed to be drawn to one another for comfort, yet cut her off, encasing her in solitude. "Sarah, come on." A voice pierced her spiral of confusion. It was Jake, looking disheveled but earnest. "We're doing a group check on the upper floor. You in?" The upper floor, a place they whispered about, wearing a shroud of caution like a badge of honor. That was where they kept the equipment, and perhaps more concerningly, where others had vanished. The just go along rule gnawed at Sarah, but Jake's outstretched hand beckoned with warmth, his presence a brief spark against the encroaching darkness. She nodded, hesitant but craving connection, and together they climbed the creaking stairs. Each step echoed ominously, reverberating through the emptiness like a sad tune played on a forgotten piano. The air grew colder, biting at her exposed skin, as they reached the landing. A flickering light emitted from the small window, casting eerie shadows that leaped and skittered along the walls. The scene was unsettling. A patch of the floor was scattered with tools and equipment, but what caught her breath was a strange shape drawn in the frost on the glass. Letters formed into an indecipherable warning. As she approached, Sarah could feel Jake's tension beside her. "Don't touch it," he whispered, eyes wide. "Just look." She tried to take a breath, but her lungs were seized by an invisible grip. The words twirled into something almost ghostly. Beneath layers of frost, time passed differently here, perhaps sticky with tension and whispers of regret. Suddenly, a rumble echoed, a deep growl reverberating through the icy hallways. It sent icy prickles racing down her spine. Something was off. Sarah turned her gaze to Jake. The warmth in his eyes had vanished, replaced by a chilling blue that spoke of secrets he feared to share. "Run!" he gasped, snapping her out of her trance. They bolted back toward the stairs, but Sarah's heart raced with thoughts of her children, melding with the terror chasing them down the hall. The icy fragments of her humanity, eroding into the unforgiving landscape, twisted her sight further, but as they fled, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and a ferocious wind swept past them, howling with a violent fury. Guess what happened next? No one was waiting behind them. Not in the shadows, nor at the foot of the stairs. And then, in the distance, chilling laughter echoed through the halls. It was a sound crafted from nightmares, one that echoed off the walls, leaving her breath stuck in her throat. What awaited Sarah and Jake as they raced against an unseen terror? Was it too late to escape the horrors that the outpost hid beneath its icy facade? The laughter faded, yet its lingering echo filled the space between Sarah and Jake, sounding more like a taunt than a mirthful jest. They burst down the staircase, each footfall heavy with desperation, the icy air biting into their lungs. Sarah felt the walls closing in, a chilling presence mirroring their haste as they sprinted. Fear surged through her, whispering of the unseen thing that pursued them. They reached the ground floor, panting, the frantic rhythm of their hearts matching the racing thoughts in Sarah's mind. What was that? She gasped, seeking Jake's reassurance. But his gaze was fixed ahead, eyes wide and brimming with unspoken dread. For the first time, she noticed the trail of sweat glistening on his brow, a stark contrast against the bitter cold that he grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward the main room. "We need to find everyone else. We're not safe alone." His grip was firm, determined, but what had once felt like solidarity now felt like a rush toward impending doom. Sarah exchanged glances with frightened colleagues, peering from their hiding spots as if they were waiting for the cold wind to claim them next. Tension crackled in the air, and unintelligible whispers fluttered like shadows, weaving through the frightened faces, each one a reflection of her own terror. "Did you see it?" one colleague murmured, a tremor in her voice. "The shape? The letters?" Sarah felt the heat rise in her cheeks at the gargoyle of uncertainty that clawed at her sanity. Whatever they had unearthed upstairs, this base was under siege by something far more sinister than the relentless cold. The rules, those oppressive guidelines that had dictated their conduct, suddenly seemed meaningless against an oncoming threat that even they had struggled to articulate. Jake nudged her forward, his tension palpable, drawing her away from the growing whispers. "We need to stick together. The equipment room, it has supplies." "Supplies?" Sarah echoed, confusion mingling with panic. "But what if that thing is still there?" Suddenly, a deafening crash erupted from above, and the lights flickered violently, plunging them into shadows that felt alive. She felt herself drawn towards the flickering glow from a set of emergency lights struggling for relevance, beckoning them to the back of the room. Without a word, they moved, weaving through the desk strewn with reports and equipment. As they reached the door, a shrill, scraping sound suddenly filled the space, like nails raking through metal. An icy chill chased its way down Sarah's spine, and she turned just in time to see the glass of the window fracturing, spiderwebbing across its surface. Something outside, a shadow in the storm, was pressing against the wall, pushing to break through. "No, no, no!" Sarah gasped, clutching Jake's arm as the world seemed to tilt dangerously. The whispers intensified, circling around her like a storm, mingling with the howls of the wind. In her panic, she thought of the last letter she'd read, the ominous warning clawing deeper into her mind. "We have to go," she shouted, her voice rising above the din. "We can't stay here." But as they rushed towards the exit, the door slammed shut, the invisible hand of dread locking them in place. The shadows grew heavier and closer, wrapping around them like a suffocating blanket. A shivering breath brushed against Sarah's cheek, and she felt it, an icy presence hovering just behind her. Sarah, a voice, low and chilling, whispering her name like it had been rehearsed. Jake spun around, eyes wide with terror, but whatever was there stayed just out of view, lurking in the darkness except for that icy whisper. With every nerve on edge, Sarah felt the flicker of hope extinguished again. There had to be a way out of this nightmare, but what did they need to do? And as the shadows twisted and peeled away, revealing more of the secrets buried in the freezing ground, a haunting thought crossed her mind: could the very rules that had governed their stay become their downfall? The whispers surged, wrapping Sarah in a cocoon of chilling dread. The darkened room felt alive, pulsing with an energy that gnawed at her sanity. Shadows stretched and flickered, taunting her like malevolent silhouettes ready to strike. The icy breath lingered behind her. "Sarah," it echoed again, and Jake's arm went rigid beside her. She turned to face the darkness, but nothing tangible materialized. Just an oppressive void that gnawed at her instincts, urging her to run. "Jake, we have to do something," she stammered. "We can't just stand here." Frantic, Jake dashed toward the nearest desk, his mind racing. He tossed aside papers and equipment, his eyes searching for anything that could help. "There's got to be something in here," he gasped, the tension in his voice matching the frantic rhythm of their hearts. The door shuddered violently, rattling against its frame. They spun around, caught between the growing dread of what lay inside and the looming threat of what waited just beyond the door. The shadows swirled tighter around them, pressing down like a heavy fog. Above them, the echo of laughter returned, sinister and mocking. It curled around Sarah's mind, sinking into her thoughts, each chuckle a reminder of danger and despair. "What are we supposed to do?" she whispered, desperation creeping in. "We need a plan." Jake grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall, its bright red color a stark contrast in the gloom. "This could work," he said, though doubt dripped from every word. "We can use it to blind it or something." Another deafening crash echoed from above, sending dust and debris raining down. Sarah's heart raced. "If we have to face it, I want to know what we're up against." She turned her gaze back to the shadows, feeling the weight of its presence closing in. "What is it?" A cold shudder gripped her, and a thought slithered through her head: was the creature born from their very fears? The unarticulated dread of isolation and the frigid desolation. The rules they had treated like guidelines suddenly seemed like threads binding them to a fate they could not escape. Jake, the letters. She gasped, her mind racing back. They mentioned something, maybe it's connected to those rules. Jake's brows furrowed in confusion, his grip tightening around the extinguisher. What do you mean? They were warnings, Jake. She took a breath, her pulse pounding. People were hurt here. They followed rules that led them into darkness. They don't always keep you safe. With a deep breath, Jake nodded, grasping the gravity of her words. Then we need to break them. Whatever kept them tethered, we can't let it do the same to us. As they planned, the lights flickered again, casting fleeting shadows across the faces of their trembling colleagues, huddled together like frightened animals. The whispers twisted into a cacophony of urgency, mingling with the gnashing of teeth at the back of their minds. A figure loomed just at the edge of dimness, a blurry shape watching, waiting. Now! Sarah yelled, lunging forward, pulling Jake along with her. They barreled for the door, the blaring alarms warning of impending chaos just as the shadow surged to meet them. The fire extinguisher raised, hitting the door with a shattering thud. In an instant, a freezing gust swirled past them, filling the space with an unnatural chill that froze the blood in her veins. Cracking the door open briefly, Sarah and Jake glimpsed an unearthly storm outside, swirling in a frenzy, howling like a banshee. The whole place was alive with the echoes of their past, twisted voices drowned in regret, but the moment hung like a precipice, and a chilling clarity hit her. We can't just run. She shouted, her voice swallowed by the storm. We need answers. As they faced the growing storm, another piece of the puzzle snapped into place. The letters, she murmured. If we don't uncover the truth, we're no better than those that came before us. The wind picked up, shrieking like a tortured soul, and then silence. Just when they thought they could escape, everything shifted. The silhouette of a figure emerged from the darker shadows, and the air felt electric. This is not over, it echoed, voice layered with malice. In that moment, Sarah understood, some rules cannot be broken, and the truth demands a price. Jake, we need to see what it wants, she whispered, terrified yet resolute. And as they faced the unknown, a new decision loomed, one that might seal their fates forever. What could possibly await them in the depths of their own creation? Sarah's heart pounded against her ribcage as the figure loomed. It shifted, as if made of shadow and smoke, twisting and writhing in ways that defied logic. The lingering chill seeped into her bones, a reminder that whatever stood before them was no mere specter. Jake, she breathed, panic coursing through her veins. What if we're not supposed to find the truth? He searched her eyes, understanding dawning but shadowed by fear. We can't turn back now, he whispered, clutching the fire extinguisher tightly, a poor imitation of bravery. A low murmur began to rise from the figure, growing into an unholy cacophony that reverberated against the walls. You seek knowledge, but it comes with a cost. The voice chilled Sarah to the marrow. The shadows coiled tighter, pushing her and Jake back, forcing them against the door. No, Sarah protested, but her voice trembled. What do you want from us? Your awakening, it hissed. Complete the cycle. The walls trembled, dust cascading from the ceiling, and a wave of dread washed over her. What cycle? She demanded, feeling the warmth of courage fading, her mind racing. Everything you've learned, everything you've broken comes with consequences. The rules are your chains, yet you resist. A sudden blast of cold air swept through the room, catching them off guard. The figures shimmering in the dark seemed to claw at the air, a mass of shadows flickering with wrathful intensity. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, she felt trapped, suffocated. Stop! Jake shouted, voice barely breaking through the mounting terror. We're not your puppets. If there are rules, we can rewrite them. Silence hung heavy, smothering her fears for a moment. The figure recoiled, its form shifting like ink in water. Rewrite? A futile endeavor, the darkness knows only consumption. With every word the figure spoke, shadows latched onto Sarah's thoughts, drawing her closer to despair. But together, she and Jake would still fight. She forced herself to step forward, gripping Jake's arm. "We will not be consumed," she declared fiercely, though her hands trembled. The darkness thickened, and the laughter of countless voices erupted, echoing off the walls. Then, become lost within the riddle of souls, the figure's tone shifted, icy, filled with mocking delight, and in that instant, the shadows all around them surged, twisting as reality itself fluctuated. The floor shook, and bolts of red light crossed the room, illuminating images of lost souls, faces twisted in anguish, staring wide-eyed from the shadows. "Sarah!" Jake yelled, pulling her back as the emergence of spectral figures spilled forth, dragging their fear into the light. "We need to go now." But Sarah could feel the weight of the truth pressing down, a magnetic pull toward what lay beyond. "No. We have to learn what they knew," she insisted, adrenaline fueling her determination. As they stood locked in confrontation with the shadows, clarity began to seep into her mind. A pattern emerged, a method to the madness, clues piled in frantic invocations. The letters, the rules. Every warning might lead to a way out. With every word she spoke, she felt the shadows flicker, falter, just for an instant. If we confront the riddle, if we can solve it, maybe we can break free. But the sinister laughter grew louder, more pronounced, merging with the howl of wind from outside. The air felt electric, crackling with danger as the tormentors closed in like vultures before feeding. "Do you dare challenge us?" The figure swirled, growing larger, looming like a tempest poised to strike. "We do," Jake shouted, standing firm. "We say it ends here." In that instant, something shifted in the room. The shadows recoiled, and for the first time, Sarah felt a spark of hope. But would it be enough? "Then the final truth will expose you," the figure hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "You stand at the precipice of understanding." Everything went black then, plunging them into an abyss where whispers turned to screams and shadows twirled, forming a riddle that only few could solve. With hearts racing, they grasped each other's hands. "We face this together, whatever it is." As the darkness enveloped them, a final question echoed in the void: will you survive the revelation? In that moment, Sarah knew the battle was just beginning. What would it reveal, and would they emerge unscathed? Plunged into the abyss, Sarah and Jake clung to each other like lifelines in a storm. The air buzzed with an electric charge, a warning crackling through the disorienting darkness. The oppressive weight of uncertainty pressed down, making it hard to draw a breath. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Suddenly, the void split with blinding light, jarring and surreal. They found themselves standing on a narrow path, suspended above an infinite chasm. Faces twisted in anguish flitted at the edges of their vision, whispering secrets in a language both familiar and alien. "Jake!" Sarah gasped, pointing. "Look!" Before them stretched a vast, shifting collage of symbols, each glowing with an eerie, pulsating light. They floated above the ground, twisting beneath their feet, forming a giant imposing question mark. "The riddle of souls," Jake breathed, squinting as he took an instinctive step forward. As they ventured closer, whispers crescendoed into a symphony of tortured cries that tangled in their minds. "You must confront the past to unsettle the future," they lamented, their longings and fears long tethered to that very spot. Sarah gripped Jake's arm tighter, hoping her racing heart would convey her determination. "What did it mean by the rules? Maybe it has to do with those pieces of paper we found." Jake replied, recalling the frayed edges of the notes strewn across the old table in the cabin. "The warnings and the tales, they could hold something important." "Then we have to remember all of it," Sarah said, her mind churning as her thoughts took flight. Every letter, every warning could be a key to solving this riddle. As if provoked by her words, the glowing symbols began shifting violently. Cold wind swept through, limbs of shadows sweeping forward, eager to drag them back into despair. Time is running out. Sarah shouted, panic flaring her chest. We need to decipher it now. The symbols flickered, enveloping them in bright hues of blues and greens, then fading into deep reds that pulsed like a heartbeat. Complete the cycle, echoed hauntingly, swirling around them. The vivid colors morphed, revealing faint images of others' lost souls who had attempted to answer the riddle, their faces etched with defeat. The more Sarah looked, the more she recognized the weight pressing against her thoughts, the nagging doubts they all shared. Sarah! We can't let ourselves get lost in that despair. Jake shouted, pulling her back as she nearly stepped off the labyrinthine path. His eyes caught hers, igniting a flicker of hope amid the darkness. We're not them. No, she replied, shaking her head fiercely. We won't become shadows, we can't. Resolute, they stepped forward together, determined to apply the memories they held, weaving through the symbols that danced around them. One by one, they recited the phrases from before, channeling their strength through words that felt alive in their throats. Beware the 13th step, a stranger's whispers lead to oblivion, they intoned, and shadows hesitated, flickering in recognition. The air shifted, cracking like glass as the remnants of the past trembled at their declaration. Confront the truth, unveil your chains, a multitude of voices cried out, vibrating through the ethereal expanse. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath them. The path quivered, and with an earth-shattering roar, the darkness surged forward again, more malevolent and voracious than before. Hold on! Jake exclaimed, gripping Sarah's hand as they felt themselves teetering at the edge. But before they could react, the morass of shadows lunged at them, reaching out with tearing fingers of light and dark, blurring the lines between reality and nightmare. Their screams shattered the impending silence, converging into one primal roar. As everything collapsed around them, leaving only the echo of their heartbeat in the maelstrom, Sarah felt the terrible truth drawing closer, a realization clawing at the edges of her consciousness. Jake! What if the rules are tied to us? She shouted, breathless, fear etched across her features. Then we have to solve the riddle first. He bellowed, wide-eyed with dread. In that moment, the shadows intensified, swirling to engulf them. Will we break free, or will we become part of the riddle? Sarah whispered, bracing for the answer, but the darkness raged on, consuming their words, leaving only the chilling sound of whispers echoing their fate. Was this the moment they would awaken, or would they be forever lost in the depths? The world twisted and folded like paper pressed into an origami figure, and for a heart-stopping moment, Sarah and Jake were weightless. Then, with a violent jolt, they splashed back into reality, landing on a cold, concrete floor that thrummed beneath them. Where? Sarah struggled to get her bearings, blinking against the blinding fluorescence above. She could hear a low humming, an unsettling lull that wove a sense of dread into her gut. The air felt stale, and an oppressive silence surrounded them. I don't know, Jake answered, pushing himself up. He looked around, squinting. We're still inside. But it's different. They were in a dim hallway with peeling walls, doors lining either side. Flickering lights cast erratic shadows that danced ominously. Each door seemed to beckon them forward, whispering secrets that could shatter fragile sanity. Look! Jake pointed to a door at the far end, a heavy steel hatch that looked almost out of place. It had a small, grimy window embedded in its center, offering a glimpse into a darkened room beyond. What's in there? A flicker of hesitation crossed Sarah's face. I don't think we should. It might hold the answers we need. The symbols, the rules, they're all connected, he urged, his voice urgent yet thin. Their pulses quickened as they approached the door. Each step echoed, the sound magnified in the eerie quiet. Jake reached for the doorknob, hand trembling as he turned it. The moment the door creaked open, a wave of cold air poured out, pungent and dry, carrying echoes of distant screams, whispers of madness swirling in the wind. The room was dimly lit, filled with strange, flickering lights that floated like fireflies across the dusty floor. What the hell? Sarah whispered. Inside, a table was strewn with papers that rustled with an unseen breeze. In the center lay a tattered book, its leather cover embossed with worn symbols similar to those they had encountered before. Jake stepped inside, drawn by an invisible force. "Jake, wait!" Sarah grabbed his arm, pulling him back just as the air turned electric again, crackling with raw energy. Shadows coalesced in the corners, warping and reaching toward them. "We don't have time," he protested, his eyes wide with determination, pulling free from her grip. This book could hold the key. But as he reached for the book, a sound reverberated through the room, a slow, guttural growl that seemed to come from the very walls. "Jake!" Sarah's voice oscillated between urgency and fear. "Get away!" Before she could grab him, the shadows lunged, seizing Jake with icy fingers, dragging him in slow motion across the floor. He struggled, eyes wild. "Sarah! Help me!" Desperation unfurling within her, Sarah lunged forward and yanked at the shadows. It felt like pulling against fog, but she held on, drawing strength from a well of stubbornness. "Let him go!" She screamed, her voice ringing through the dimness. The shadows recoiled, and suddenly it all stopped. The air shifted. Jake gasped, feeling as if he were breaking through a surface of murky water, his hand breaking free from their grasp. But then the whispers grew louder, honing in on her, strident, relentless. "Confront the truth, unveil your chains," they chanted, their voices a symphony of terror. Both terrified and entranced, Sarah's heart raced as she reached the book. She flipped it open, pages fluttering like wings, revealing the same symbols they had encountered before. And hidden within was a new challenge, a terrifying truth about the riddle they had faced. "Jake, it's complicated," she stammered, her eyes scanning the words. They were instructions, warnings, a map leading deeper into their fears. "Then let us decipher it." He leaned in closer, the shadows retreating ever so slightly. "We can't afford to hesitate." As they delved into the secrets penned in that book, a realization struck them, colder than the shadows themselves, a truth rooted in their shared past, binding them to the malevolence surrounding them. "Sarah, what if this is a test? What if we're the next victims?" Jake's voice trembled, fear taking root. The lights flickered again, and the shadows swelled ominously around the door. "Then we need to escape before it's too late," she urged, but as the words left her mouth, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening boom. "Are we trapped?" Jake stared, panic-stricken, the air thickening around them. "Not yet," Sarah whispered, heart pounding, "but we're running out of options." And as laughter echoed from the shadows, a realization dawned on them: the riddle was more than a puzzle. It was a reflection of their deepest fears, and failure meant being swallowed whole by the darkness. "Let us find out where this leads, or we'll be just another part of the riddle," Sarah breathed, determination flaring. With shaky breaths, they turned back towards the depths of the room, drawing closer to the unknown. But before they could step forward, a chilling voice slithered through the air. "Are you ready to unveil your chains?" As dread crawled up her spine, Sarah faced the door one last time, gripping Jake's hand tighter. "Will we break free, or will we become part of the darkness?" The question hung heavily in the air, as they took a step closer into the abyss of revelation. The air grew heavier, thick with a sense of foreboding as they pressed deeper into the room. The book held a magnetic pull, tempting them with knowledge that felt like a double-edged sword. Shadows flickered dangerously at the edges of their vision. Sarah's pulse thundered in her ears, a drumbeat echoing the fear that encompassed them. "Look at this," Jake gasped, eyes scanning the pages. The text pulsed like a heartbeat, symbols intertwining to form grotesque shapes. "These are burials." Sarah interrupted, voice barely above a whisper. She pointed to a sketch of a twisted, labyrinthine structure surrounded by ominous figures. "They're describing rituals." Jake's face paled. "Rituals to what? How do we end this?" Just then, the lights flickered again, casting grotesque shadows that morphed into the shapes they saw in the drawings. A figure loomed in the corner, indistinct yet menacing, its eyes burning like coals in the dark. "This isn't just a test," he muttered, horror dawning. "It's a sacrifice." The shadows enveloped them, whispering promises of despair, coaxing them to relent. "You cannot escape the truth. You cannot escape your fate," they hissed, their voices entwining like smoke. "No. This can't be happening," Sarah cried, stepping back, heart racing, the drifting whispers clawing at her sanity. Jake clutched at the book, as if it could provide protection. "We have to break this cycle." These people, they were drawn in. And now he hesitated, realizing the implication. "They're trapped, just like us." His words hung in the air, taunting them both. Outside, the low hum transformed into an uproarious chorus, a cacophony of screams mixed with chilling laughter. A cold sweat trickled down Sarah's spine as she recalled those tortured faces whispering in her nightmares. "Sarah!" Jake's voice rose desperately, breaking her trance. "Focus. We need to find the exit. It has to be in here." They turned towards a wall adorned with more symbols, intricate and ancient. "What if this is a map?" Jake suggested, stepping closer. "Maybe it shows where to go. Or it could lead us deeper into hell," she warned, glancing nervously at the swirling shadows. "We don't have time to hesitate," he urged, desperation lacing his words. As tension constricted around them, Sarah placed her hand on the wall, tracing the glyphs with trembling fingers. Suddenly, a vibration reverberated through her, the floor murmuring like a living entity. "Jake!" she shouted, pulling her hand back. "This isn't just a map." It's with a violent crash, the floor split open, revealing a gaping void below. An abyss filled with thick, swirling darkness, as if it had opened up to swallow all light. From the depths, a soft, sing-song voice taunted, "Did you think you could uncover the truth without sacrifice?" A deep, primal fear crawled up Sarah's throat. "We have to get out of here." "Wait!" Jake shouted suddenly, excitement lighting his features. "Listen to the tone. It's familiar. It matches the patterns in here. Maybe if we replicate it, are you insane?" she snapped, glancing anxiously at the widening chasm. "If we stay here any longer, we'll be consumed. Trust me, Sarah. It's our only chance." Heart hammering, they positioned themselves before the dark opening. Taking a deep breath, Jake began to hum in sync with the eerie chant that filled the air. Sarah hesitated, but fear drove her to join him. Together, their voices intertwined, creating a sound that vibrated with urgency. As they reached a crescendo, the air around them shimmered, the shadows hesitating in their advance. For a fleeting moment, it felt like something vital was unshackling from the room, a chance at freedom unfolding, but before they could process the shift, the shadows recoiled, hissed in anger, and surged forward like a tidal wave, swallowing up their song. "Run!" Jake yelled, gripping her hand with an iron grasp as he pulled her back. They stumbled toward the door, heartbeats echoing like thunder as the room began to collapse around them, shadows devouring everything in sight. "I can't lose you!" Sarah screamed, her voice swallowed by the chaos. But the darkness clawed at her mind, leaving behind a lingering chill. As they neared the bolted door, it began to fuse into the wall, sealing shut. "No, no!" she gasped, her pulse racing as she banged against the steel. The shadows laughed, a cacophony of shrieks that burrowed deep into her brain. Will we unravel the shadows, or will we be lost within our own fears? The question echoed in the thick air, taunting them, trapped, suffocating, with time slipping away. They braced for the inevitable one last chance to escape the darkness, before it consumed them whole. Jake's grip tightened as he yanked at the door, panic igniting his every move. "Push!" he shouted, desperation tinging his voice. Sarah threw herself against the metal barrier, the cold surface biting into her palm. It wouldn't budge. The laughter of shadows filled the air, mocking their plight, a sound that reverberated in her bones. "Why won't it open?" she cried, her chest heaving with fear. The shadows coiled tighter around them, an ever-present reminder of the specters just out of reach, waiting to drag them into oblivion. The humming intensified, almost as if the walls themselves were alive, resonating with the bleak energy of the room. Maybe the symbols could help. Jake shouted, eyes darting to the wall. "The map." "What do you mean?" she breathed, mind racing. "I don't see how we could look." "The inscriptions." He pointed frantically. "They're shifting. If we can decipher them, maybe we can find a way out." Sarah studied the glyphs, her heart pounding. They flickered like fireflies in the dark, blurring into shapes that twisted and morphed before her eyes. It's like they're watching us," she whispered, a tremor creeping into her voice. "Stop it. Focus." Jake snapped, and Sarah felt a jolt at his urgency. She forced the whispery voices out of her head, concentrating on the symbols. The more she stared, the more they seemed to ripple, colors pulsing, shadows twisting grotesquely. "This one," she shouted, recognizing a symbol contrasting sharply against the darker carvings. "What if it means a way to break the seal? Then let us chant it." Jake encouraged, though a flicker of doubt crossed his face. The room's frantic energy wore on their sanity, but the only way was forward. Collecting herself, Sarah stepped closer to the wall as Jake followed suit. Together, they breathed deeply before mimicking the intricate symbols, their voices melding in a desperate call. The air thickened, vibrating as their words echoed through the room. The instant it pierced the dark, the shadows writhed, hissing as if in pain. "Yes!" Jake shouted, triumph glimmering in his eyes, but the shadows roared, a cacophony of heartbreak mixed with fury. The ground began to quake, and Sarah fought to keep her balance. "It's working!" she cried, heart racing in rhythm with the trembling earth. Yet ominous growls rose from the chasm, a snarling beast awakened, the door shuddered, but still did not yield, the room responding violently to their chanting. "Keep going," Jake urged, their voices mingling in frantic urgency. Suddenly, the floor vibrated violently beneath them and a fissure split open farther down the room, a churning black abyss looming larger. Sarah stumbled back, her voice catching in her throat. "Jake, we need to. I know. Just hold on." He barely glanced at her, urgency snapping in his actions. The walls started to crumble around them, bits of stone and debris plummeting into the darkness. Their chant faltered as the chaos screamed louder, drowning them in a symphony of despair. "Look!" Sarah shouted, gasping as a new symbol burned into the wall. "It's shifting. We can't let it close before," but it was too late. The abyss roared, dragging the air from her lungs as it crept closer, tendrils of darkness reaching for them, eager to claim what had strayed too near. "Jake!" Sarah yelled, panic rising like bile in her throat. She could almost feel the icy fingers brushing against her. "Use the final symbol," he shouted. "We have to do it. Just do it," she urged, desperation flooding every word. They mustered every ounce of bravery left, unleashing a final, powerful chant that shook the very foundation of the room. A piercing shriek erupted, a sound so agonizing it shattered the air. Then, silence. Suddenly, an opaque darkness enveloped them, a chill settling over their skin as the shadows froze mid-scream. Time slowed, the world narrowing to a pinprick of light against overwhelming darkness. "Did we?" Sarah breathed, eyes wide and heart pounding. But before Jake could answer, the ground gave way, a whirlwind of shadows erupting as the vortex threatened to swallow them both whole. "Hold on!" he screamed as he reached for Sarah, but the abyss yanked her from his grasp. The darkness coiled around her, tightening its grip, pulling her toward an unknown fate. Her heart pounded in her chest as she prepared to face whatever lay ahead, and then nothing. Everything went black, silence swallowing her whole. In that agonizing void, Sarah's thoughts spiraled. Were they truly trapped? Were they sacrificial pawns in a game they barely understood? Just as her hope began to flicker, a whisper floated through the dark, soft yet chilling. Will you awaken the past, or will you be lost among the forgotten? As the last shred of light flickered, a question echoed: what price would you pay to uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? The darkness surrounded Sarah like a thick blanket, smothering her breath and pulling her mind apart. For a moment, she floated in that void, lost and terrified, trapped in a limbo of her own fears. But then, just when despair threatened to claim her for good, a glimmer of light broke through flickering, fragile like a candle flicking against the wind. She could see Jake. He was holding on to a piece of that light, struggling against the shadows trying to pull him back into the abyss. "Sarah!" he shouted, his voice fierce and determined. "Don't give up. We can beat this." With a rush of energy, their thoughts connected, the memories of their journey sparking like kindling in the night. Faces twisted in hopelessness flitted through their minds, pleading through the veil of the past. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for those who had come before them. "It's not just us," Sarah shouted, fury rising up inside her like a flame. "We're taking back control. We'll break this cycle." As if the shadows heard her proclamation, they twisted and writhed, howling with anger. Suddenly, the oppressive darkness began to pull away, retreating against the force of their determination. Together, they reached for each other, their hands intertwining in a desperate grasp of hope. "On three," Jake said, his voice steady against the tempest. 1, 2, 3. At that moment, they shouted the last symbol together, their voices rising above the swirling chaos. The walls trembled, split apart, and in a blinding flash of light, the shadows erupted like a wave crashing against a shore, scattering into nothingness. They were thrown back through the tunnel of swirling colors and sounds, pulled through the vortex until they landed flat on the cold concrete floor of the base all over again. The fluorescent lights flickered over them, dim and weary, as reality set back in. Jake gasped, reaching for Sarah. "Did we?" he breathed, eyes wide in disbelief. I think we did it." She gasped, a soaring rush of relief washing over her as she took in the familiar stunted walls around them, now devoid of the ghostly whispers. The raging anxiety that had once held her captive began to lift, but it wasn't over yet. They needed to ensure that the horrors they had faced wouldn't claim another soul. "We have to tell the others," Sarah insisted, pulling him out of the main room and sprinting toward the gathering hall. As they neared the door, they saw their colleagues huddled together, pale faces etched with shadows of worry, and some clinging onto each other like they were the lifeline. "Sarah!" "Jake!" one of the veterans exclaimed, her voice filled with disbelief. "You're back." We thought no time to explain just yet," Sarah interrupted, her heart pounding with urgency. "It's coming. We can't let those shadows keep feeding on fear. We need to rally everyone." With Jake by her side, they moved through the small crowd, igniting courage and resolve. "We're not victims," Sarah shouted, standing taller now. "Those rules we had? They were chains keeping us tied to this nightmare. But we broke free, and together we can change this." A wave of emotion surged through the group, determination fueling the fire within. They felt it. They could rise against the predatory shadows. One by one, they echoed back the courage that held them together, that provided warmth even in the chilling embrace of the outpost. Fear mingled with newfound strength as old whispers turned into shared affirmations. Then, as if drawn by a magnet, they surrounded the base, forming a circle of defiance, each face steeled with purpose. "This ends now," they shouted as one, launching into a chant that resonated through the corridors, vibrating against the cold, sterile walls. Outside, the winds howled, but it was no longer an eerie echo of despair, it was a battle cry that amplified their strength. The shadows stirred, twisting into fearsome shapes, but the group held strong, their combined conviction pushing back against the darkness. And then, with one last wave of will, they lifted their voices high and clear. "Into the storm. We embrace the truth. We embrace our strength. Each word slashed at the shadows surrounding them, tearing away their unseen grip. Light poured into the space where darkness once reigned, bright and cleansing. With a final cry of unity, the shadows shrieked as they disintegrated into the void, freeing the remnants of lost souls and fading whispers from an eternity of torment. The base fell silent, the wind no longer haunting, but carrying a gentle promise of hope. Sarah looked around, meeting Jake's eyes filled with relief, with a knowing that they triumphed against the unthinkable. A lump formed in her throat. They would rebuild, not just a base, but a community fortified by shared experiences and honest truths. "We did it," she whispered, clutching his hand tightly. "Together, we really did it." The chilling winds outside faded to a soft sigh, a quiet farewell to the shadows. The outpost stood still, waiting for its residents to turn the page and begin anew, and as Sarah exchanged hopeful glances with her fellow recruits, she knew this wasn't just the end of a nightmare, it was the awakening of a brighter future, one that they could mold together, far away from the icy grasp of fear. This was not just survival. This was a new beginning. Now, as a new chapter unfolds on the horizon, you need to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to fuel the algorithm and keep these tales alive. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. Tell us what you think. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Let us keep the momentum going.